didn't expect it to be this violent. I mean,
well,
honestly,
ironically, the 3 directors that said it had to get toned down are all men.
Right. So they actually feared the material. But and there's one specific scene in it, I think you might know what I'm talking about, that involves, let's just say this, it involves both sex and gore. Yeah. That is, I have never, when you're like, I've seen heads chopped off. I've seen this. There are things that happen that I have never seen in a movie. and that's that scene in particular where it mixes a sex act with also gore is never seen it. Never. I don't know that I definitely shielded my eyes during this scene. Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. Very excited to have Jessica Cameron, one of my favorite scream queens, actresses, producer, writer, director. She is a force of nature in horror, and I'm pleased to have her on for, God, I think this is like maybe her 4th or 5th time being on the podcast because she's done our live show. Couple quick reminders. We are going to be at the Sundance Film Festival, and you are going to want to follow our daily podcast from Sundance. We're going to be doing a lot of activities there, panels and daily podcast coverage, as well as video coverage. So check that out. Also, remember to go to our Patreon. Go to patreon.com/filmthreat. And of course, follow us on social media. We're Film Threat on everything. And someone who knows a lot more about social media than I do, for sure, Jessica Cameron, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me back. It's a pleasure to be here.
Having you, there's an open door for whenever you want to come back, because you're doing so many things. I mean, we were talking before we started recording about like you always have stuff happening. I think that's in the industry. You kind of have to have many irons in the fire, and you just sort of pivot to the one that is, one that's paying you, I guess, or the one that like needs your attention. Yeah. So how do you keep up that balance with your various projects? What gets your attention?
Well, that's always the hardest part, right? And I have to confess, where I feel I'm weakest in my life is managing my personal and professional life. Because I think like for me as an artist, a filmmaker and an actor, it's so easy to focus solely on all of the stuff I have to do on a daily basis that it can be 18 hours a day. And people don't understand it until they like come and stay at my place. And then they're like, oh, now I get it. Like you literally work till 2, go to sleep, wake up at 8 a.m., then start again. And that's kind of what you do. So I try to always focus on what brings me the greatest amount of joy and what I'm excited about. That's usually like where I lead as a filmmaker. What I start with, basically, if I can't get an idea out of my head, if I have to dream it and think about it, and I keep finding myself going back to it, then it goes into a point where I start making notes on it and it becomes a treatment. And then from there it becomes a script. But I usually let it saturate for like a couple of months. And if I can't get it, if I can't stop thinking about it, my brain, how it typically works is if I come up with an idea, I'm like, oh, that's a really good concept. Over the first month, I'll often think about like, oh, it's kind of similar to this. And as soon as I go down that route, I know that it's not going to be something that I personally want to create because it's similar to something else that's already out there.
Now, 2 quick things. One, I'm surprised you mentioned personal life, because a lot of people that I know in this industry just don't have a personal life. The go-to is my career is more important. I'll have a personal life once I have reached a certain level, whether it's some sort of monetary goal, whether it's I've got to direct my first feature by the time I'm 30 or whatever sort of arbitrary thing that people put on it. So most people just don't have a personal life. I happen to know that. Or if it's an idea, if some sort of personal life begins to happen and gets in the way of work, I've known so many people to just shut that down. So I feel you when you talk about balancing. I've had those moments where it's like personal life, whatever, so it kind of, but when you choose material to pursue, to direct, produce, and star in, I know you don't always make yourself the star, right? You're in your films, but you're not always the focus.
Well, and let's be honest, I'm in them more, quite honestly, due to budget. because I don't.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's it?
110%.
Right.
So I've like the first film I did, I was in solely because I couldn't. It's somewhat hard to find actors in specific appearances that you want with specific skills who will work on a low budget film. It just is. And genre adds an extra difficult layer, right? Because there are a bunch of actors that just think that they're above it. I don't. I really encourage any actor listening to not go down that road. I think as an actor, you need to be focused on the character and not the genre, right? Like you don't act a genre. When I'm acting in a horror movie, I'm not acting a horror movie. I'm playing a character who's in the situation. And I think that has such a wonderful skill set to be able to utilize when you think of it that way. That said, it was really hard to try to cast Truth or Dare, the first film that I directed, because a lot of like my colleagues and I was in a whole bunch of really great acting classes, and the number of people that were like, no, I'm not doing genre was shocking.
What?
Shocking. The number of actors. They were like, I don't want to get typecast or pigeonholed. I was like, are you nuts? Typecast, the important part of that phrase is cast, right? The best thing that can happen to any person is to be typecast, in my opinion. That means you're actively getting work. Once you're actively getting work, you have the money and the resources to be able to say, okay, now I want to do this other thing. You know, Reese Witherspoon doesn't look back and be like, well, I'm just tired of playing like the good innocent girl. No, she cashes those checks, takes them to the bank, and when she wants to make something else, she has the funding to do it.
But it's interesting because you made the good Truth or Dare movie.
Yeah.
Because there was the Blumhouse one. Oh my God. Earlier this year, I actually went on a rant. We did an entire podcast. We just called it the worst movie of the year.
Oh my, I need to listen to this one. I missed that one.
Yeah. Well, it was a short one, and we had gotten out of a screening of it. It was with my friend Norman Gidney, who I'm sure you know from Horror Buzz. He covers a lot of the horror on a lot of the horror films.
Yeah,
I
love Norman.
Norm, I love Norman too. It's Norman. I'm going to admit, I have a crush on Norman. Norman is, and his website is awesome, Horror Buzz. But we came out of the screening of Blumhouse's Truth or Dare, and we were all angry that so much money was spent, so much time was wasted, and so many people put their blood and sweat and creative juices into something that was just so awful. And then I saw your film and I'm like, oh my God, this is how you do this. Because it's in general is one set. It's a series of challenges that end up being twists, dares and truths. And oh my God, what happens over the course of the 90 minutes of you should call it Jay Cameron's Truth or Dare. I mean, they called theirs Blumhouse's Truth or Dare, which is probably
so. There's we're gonna want to get some tea. Shall we get some tea on here?
Okay, let's hear it.
Okay, so I sent I and my manager at the time, I don't work with this person anymore, sent my movie for Blumhouse to review to look at distribution.
Sure.
We didn't hear back, right? And then I find out from some other friends who have worked with Blumhouse or who have been in talks that they received an email and I'm paraphrasing, saying, we want to make a Truth or Dare movie. We don't really care about the concept. We don't really care about the specifics. It just has to be called Truth or Dare. And then I get an email like 3 months later being like, we're actually already creating a movie called Truth or Dare. So we're not interested in your film.
Well, I mean, your film...
and you can't copyright a title, so let's just be real clear.
Right.
They did nothing legally wrong. It's just kind of not a very nice way to go about it.
Well, it's
and it's a great title.
Right. It's lazy, and it wouldn't be a first in the industry, right? I mean, that kind of thing happens all the time. Although I would challenge someone to try and make a movie called Star Wars. I think that would be difficult, even though technically you can't copyright a title. An odd thing about that title, do you know that they tried to get George Lucas to change that title?
No.
That Fox was like, look, we've done some market research, and people say when they see the title Star Wars, they think it's about celebrities fighting. Which actually, that should be, you know what? You should make a movie called Star Wars about celebrities fight. Let's workshop a movie right now. Because you have your characters are, in Truth or Dare, way over the top. I did not guess completely. The twists.
Yeah.
There's a lot of twists. I mean, like twists where you're like, what? And I don't want to give them away because, I mean, that's the meat of the film there's a lot of meat in this film. But there's, in terms of the gore, I didn't expect it to get as gory. I mean, the movie should definitely has some kind of warning.
Right.
It really gets gory, but yeah, you could do Star Wars, and it would be like a fictionalized version of like a Kim Kardashian or a Caitlyn Jenner or all the.
I like
all
where this is going.
Yeah, exactly, and they're all fighting, and you call it Star Wars. Why don't you do that?
Well, here's the thing. Lucasfilms has more money than God. And I think that anytime you're doing something where, even if you're legally in the right, what I have learned through the process of making movies is that you have to have the money to legally defend your position, whether you're right or wrong. If somebody else has the money to legally pursue you, whether you're right or wrong. So, for example, even though you can't copyright a title, do I have no question that Lucasfilms would tie me up in litigation for years and years and years, only to win the settlement eventually after the film's no longer relevant?
I think I have the way to solve it. I think I have the way to solve it. Is in your logo design, you call it, the title of the movie is Reality Star Wars, and you just make the word reality really tiny.
But honestly, like the PR you'd get from it might honestly justify any legal hassle.
I just think it's. I mean, a film that is sort of in that vein is, I think, is in your wheelhouse in a sense.
Agreed.
I think it could be fun. I could tell with Truth or Dare that you were having a lot of fun with the characters.
It really was. It was so much fun. It was my first time making a movie. And it was so extreme. And it was funny because like when I also didn't want to direct it, ironically enough. I co-wrote it with the intent to find a director and just act in it. And then we had 6 directors that we went out to who I felt were capable of making a quality film at the budget that we had. And I already had secured the funding. But to my shock, 3 of the 6 came back and said, we'll happily do it. However, you have to tone down the material.
Really? Tone it down?
Tone it down.
I mean, I will say this for, and this sounds, a horror film in this, I don't want to say anything to give anything away because the gore in it is part of the challenges. Yeah. But I did not expect a film of this hyper violent to come from, I'm going to be honest, a woman director, which sounds like a horribly sexist thing to say. Because, and first of all, I hate that. I actually don't even like to even refer to as a woman director. You're just a director.
Yeah.
Like it's irrelevant. You know what I mean? You're a director. George Lucas is a director. James Cameron's a director. Just the Taika Waititi is a director. This sort of like to pigeonhole or to say you're this, so you're that. It's like no, like you're a director, then that's the job, you know. But I didn't expect it to be this violent. I mean,
well, ironically, the 3 directors that said it had to get toned down are all men.
Right. So they actually feared the material. But and there's one specific scene in it. I think you might know what I'm talking about. That involves. Let's just say this. It involves both sex and gore. Yeah. That is, I have never. You know when you're like, I've seen heads chopped off. I've seen this. There are things that happen that I have never seen in a movie. And that's that scene in particular where it mixes a sex act with also gore is never seen it. Never. I don't know that I definitely shielded my eyes during this scene.
That was a scene that caused us to lose Bridget Marquardt. I don't know if you know who she is. She was one of the Girls Next Door. She's a reality star. She was on the Girls Next Door with Hugh Hefner. She was a Playboy bunny. And I really wanted her originally for the talk show host in the opening. Because
you got Gray Drake.
I did. And I love her.
Gray Drake.
She's amazing.
Love Gray
She's amazing.
Drake.
She wasn't even thought of until after Bridget turned it down. But Bridget was literally like, this is the scene that you lost me. I was totally into doing it. And then I got there and I can't do this movie.
Wow. It's just, but also I think that it's, I mean, talk about a bold choice. To have that, and it's a big scene in the film. It's as we're getting toward the climax. Oh God. So, that this movie is in terms of, if you look up Truth or Dare, and there are other Madonna,
there's a ton of them.
Yeah, there's a ton of movies called Truth or Dare. I mean, Madonna made
there were 69 identical title matches when we made it, and 355 partial title matches. Because also, every TV show that's ever existed has done a Truth or Dare episode to some degree,
right?
Or so it seems.
But I mean, it's also sort of a marketing hook in the sense that it's a common phrase. It's like when people sort of name a movie after a familiar song title. And then you realize this has nothing to do with the movie I'm watching. All it is it's just a, there's nothing to do with the movie I'm watching. It just has to do with the, it's familiar phrase.
Yep.
So it's marketing. So yeah. So in terms of like, I mean, I'm not surprised that you had problems with some of the cast in making the film, but in terms of getting distribution and the business side and whatnot, although there had to be some production challenges.
Well, I think with independent filmmaking, there always is.
Right.
And that was also why I held so strong to the original vision of the concept. One of the things that I love about independent film, and the filmmakers that I gravitate to feel strongly the same way. And typically the films that I don't really love are the ones who don't agree with me. And that is that I feel independent film should embrace whatever the core concept is, whatever the script is, and go for it, right? Like, because on an independent film, when you don't have huge budgets, multi-million dollars, when you don't have huge teams of people telling you what not to do, that's where you should do whatever is right for the story, in my opinion, right? Because I didn't have 20 executives telling me I couldn't do this. So like literally when the 3 directors came back and said, I'll only do it if you make these revisions, I was like, but here's the thing, we can do whatever we want. Nobody is telling us not to. So I don't know why one single person would be like, let's tone it down, when I think that to me is the brilliance of independent filmmaking, which is you can really go outside the bounds of any normal kind of requirements like you have in a studio. And that's one of the things that I love, is just being able to tell the story in its actual concept, in its actual tone, and why I eventually decided to direct it, because it was heartbreaking for me to think that the script that I loved, where I was like, I've never seen anything like this, I want to do this, would get watered down. I was like, no, because then it's just another Hollywood movie.
Now, was that a tough decision to make, because you already were stretched thin in the sense that you co-wrote, you're producing, you're in it, and now directing?
It was, until one of the actors, because it was about a month and a half where we were weighing our options, because the other 3 directors that we looked at had to shift dates. So that's the thing, is that we were going to originally shoot it in the spring, summer, and the other 3 that we liked, who didn't want to change the script or water it down, couldn't do it until the end of the year, if not the following year. And that, I was just like, it's going to throw all my timing off. So when I considered that and I was holding off, it was one of the actors who came to me and was like, Jessica, you've literally told me, like, for every scene I'm in, which is a lot of them, how you want the scenes to be shot. Like, and that's so much of directing, is like planning it out, figuring it out. So I was like, oh, that you're right. You know, in my head, like I have this movie already cut in my head. So, and then it was just a matter of hiring people, you know, like my DP, my fellow producers, and just making sure that everybody was on the same page, where I was like, hey, I'm new. So I'm going to say things like, hey, this is kind of like the shot that I want, and show you with my hands what I'm thinking, because I don't know which lens it is. You know, I'm going to say this transition isn't working, but I don't really have a better idea. What are your thoughts? You know, I'm not going to have everything proper and really effective yet, because I'm really new at this, and everyone was really happy to work with me. So it was honestly the best thing, and I fell in love with directing from that standpoint, and being able to create the story and also hire the people that I loved. So, you know, like my DP, who I thought did a really great job, had never DP'd a film before. He had done camera op on a bunch of stuff, but he'd never been given that opportunity. You know, same with Mania. A DP that I'd worked with for years, who'd done a bunch of his own shorts, had never done a feature film, because a lot of the time that's like where people have a hard time breaking in. You know, they can't break that wall, that barrier. So I found like being able to give people like that an opportunity, especially when you can't pay them necessarily what they're worth. You know, I'll find people that I've worked with, and as an actor, I see a lot of people on sets, because I do 9 or 15 indies a year. So I'll see people on set and I'll be like, that person's really going over and above. They're doing an amazing job. And I'll talk to them, and he'll be like the best, you know, first AD ever. And I'll talk to him. He'll be like, oh yeah, it's my dream to be a script supervisor or whatever it is. And I'll be like, you know what? I can make that happen. I can't pay you well for it, right. But once you do a couple low budgets, hopefully you'll do them as well as you're doing this job, and you'll get paid better and better and better, and you'll climb up that ladder. Or with Carrie Mercado, who did the effects on Truth or Dare, she had done a couple low budget indies, but nothing that had really got her out there. And Truth or Dare was like the movie, because we promoted it so well and it did so well in the festival circuit. She won a bunch of awards for effects, where she even said she's thanked me so many times, because she feels like it's what has enabled her to have such a huge career now. And right now she's like full-time on a major TV show, to the point where I'll contact her for work. She's like, I absolutely, I'm available 2 of the 7 days that you need me, because I'm literally on set.
Oh, wow.
You know, yeah, which is great, but like so awesome for her.
Wow. No, wait a sec. So you said you're doing around 9 to 15 different, like,
as an actor,
yeah, in various capacities. And I do think it's important to be prolific, meaning you gotta always have output, right? So yeah, it's not going to be, maybe you're going to be in a situation not ideal, not the best money, but you're working. And then there'll be those jobs where it's like, okay, this is good. It's TV money, you know?
Well, and that's it, right? Or like you meet somebody who has such a strong vision where you just can't help but want to do everything in your power to help them rise to the top, you know, like anything and everything I could do to help you, I would, in a heartbeat. What do you need me to do? Which I think is really also just like the beauty of independent film, is that you see these auteurs before they become auteurs. You know, you see these incredibly talented people at the early stages, and you could feel it when somebody has their shit together, and when you think that they're going to go further and continue on and just blow everyone out of the water, even though they haven't necessarily been given the money or the power to do so yet. So I try to, like, you know, and like from an actor, it's a very different process. I pick a character, like if I like the character, if I like the concept, if I like the team. So there's a lot, and quite frankly, there's a lot less to it than like choosing a film that I'm going to direct. You know, a lot less work goes into picking, you know, acting roles that I'm going to take. Although some years it's harder than others. Some years, you know, this year I think I've been offered 5, you know, attractive girl running through the woods from a serial killer, none of which I took, because I'm just like, there's literally nothing to this character. And also, I'm a big believer, regardless of my role in the film, that if the film has been done before, why do it again? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you have to bring something new to the table, in my opinion, as a horror fan, as a film fan. We don't have to recreate what's been done. And quite frankly, especially when you're talking about iconic references, if it's been done to the level of iconic, just let it stay there. Do something new.
Well, you know? I mean, I will say this is, no one is going to compare your Truth or Dare to any of the 68 other films that have Truth or Dare in the title.
Thank you. Well, you know, that when I was a kid, I always had a fear when we played Truth or Dare. Like, my mind has always gravitated towards the extreme, for better or worse. But like as a child, when we would play Truth or Dare up in small town, middle of nowhere, Canada, I was always super freaked out that people would like dare me to stab myself with a pencil or something like that. Yeah, this is me at like 7.
This is you actually thinking
7.
This is someone would dare you to do something that would physically harm you.
Right. And it was never like anything, like it never went there. Like, I think it was always like, you know, this is back in the 90s, right? Before caller ID was like a thing in Canada. We also didn't get it until way after you Americans got it. But like, it'd be like, dare to call this boy and hang up on him. You know, it was always stupid stuff. But in the back of my head, I was like, I hope there's no scissors around. Like, if it gets dare to get like violent, I was like, you have to do it. It's a dare, but I don't really want to hurt myself, but I have to do it. And luckily it just never got there, but it was something that I kept with me until I became a grown up, you know, like this like sort of fear of a children's game that never, like, again, like there was nothing. People ask me sometimes when I tell that story, they're like, what kind of Truth or Dare were you playing? I was like, it's the most generic, watered down, you know, grade 7 Truth or Dare game. But it's just, it crossed my mind. I was like, what if?
Well, God, I mean, first of all, it's funny that idea stuck with you to this day, where you could actually make a film, and I don't want to say that pencils are involved, but boy, anything's possible. Certainly in your incarnation of Truth or Dare. So, well, let's talk about like where you get like. I mean, we know where the Truth or Dare idea came from. What about Mania?
So Mania, I just had a dream. I dreamed basically the entire opening sequence, right? And then I couldn't shake this story, although I didn't know where it was going. And I knew that it had to do with mania, depression, bipolar, in that vein. And I just started doing a lot of research on all of those disorders. And by all means, like, I should clarify also, this film is not an accurate depiction. Obviously, it's a movie. It's just inspired by, we'll say, by the illness that is mania, where somebody can be very normal in so many ways and have these like high functioning moments where they're not themselves, where they kind of become a different person, not within their control. And they have these moments where the mania is driving their motives, right? And I found myself really, really fascinated and intrigued by the stories from these people who had these like manic moments. Basically, like you'll see a lot of tones throughout the movie, like the sex thing is something that's very common in people that have mania, where they'll often like literally just have this like such a strong desire, and it'll be as quick as snapping of fingers, where normal mania moment, they're going to have sex with whomever they can physically find in the next 3 minutes, you know, which is something that is ironic because some of the criticism for the film that we received when we were doing festivals was the movie centers on a lesbian couple, and spoiler alert, some of the sex involved is not just the two women. It's the mania woman and whoever she can find, which happens to be a man. And some of the people are saying you don't understand lesbians or gay culture. And I was like, no. Here's the thing. It's not about that. It's about, like, in a manic moment, it's not about that. It's not about who is this woman attracted to. It's literally this, like, unnatural desire to fuck, essentially. I hope I can swear on your podcast because I
you can do it.
To have sex with whoever is the first person that they find, and it may be a woman, it might not be. Like, it's not about who am I attracted to in this situation. It's like a very not a normal thought process in those moments. And then as quickly as you can snap into it, you can snap out of it. And then sometimes the remorse comes depending upon the person. Sometimes it doesn't. And I found all of that to be so fascinating. So of course my brain took it to a much darker place where I was like, let's have these moments get real dark, get really, really, really unpleasant, and have the morality basically falling apart throughout the duration of the film, and have the main characters, be suffering from the effects and from the results of mania, but also have it kind of deteriorate them as human beings, even though they're desperate on some level to maintain the qualities that make them who they are. They can't help but just fall apart in the end. And from there, the movie literally just kind of wrote itself. After this thought process of the opening and then doing the research on mania, and then everything else just sort of came to. There were a couple scenes that got cut for timing, unfortunately. But again, I think it's 88 minutes. So in hindsight, it's a really good thing that they did, because I would have had to trim it down. I personally try to make sure that most of my films are 90 minutes or thereabouts, because I think they're just easier for distribution. They're easier for audiences to handle. It's just now we're getting this world where movies are getting shorter and shorter. So they should be long enough to tell a story properly, but short enough that nobody says, oh my God, that was way too long.
Yeah. I always cringe when I see it's a 3-hour Oscar contender. Yeah, no, forget it. No, give me a 90-minute horror, a 90-minute. I wonder where the 90-minute comedy went. I think Judd Apatow destroyed that.
Oh, probably.
With the 2-hour plus comedy. But it's just, that's bizarre. But so what is the state of horror now? There's a lot of, I love that there's so much discussion about what's the state of horror? It's gone through sort of different stages of what would you say is the current state of the horror genre? Especially in light of things like the Halloween sequel. I want to say sequel because it's the same title as it's Halloween, right? Halloween 2018. But what's the state of horror? Is it built on franchises? Where are the new ideas? What's exciting that's happening in horror?
Well, I mean, I think that, unfortunately, I think Halloween 2018 falls under the category of how can we milk the horror fan base, right? Right. Like, we're seeing all of that, like the new Chucky. We're seeing a lot of people be like, we have these franchises that we own, so let's exploit them. Not necessarily what can we do that's going to add or further the franchise. What can we do that would 20 years from now, we'll be saying that was an iconic part of the franchise. They're like, let's just churn something out because the horror fans will buy it. So I think that right now we're at a stage where everybody from the studio heads to the executives have realized that horror fans are feverish, incredibly loyal, and it's a lucrative market. And we're seeing that now on TV as well. Like, we've never seen this much horror in television ever, even in mainstream stuff. Yeah. And we have for the last couple of years. I remember watching Breaking Bad before that went off the air. And even though that wasn't a horror show per se, there were very graphic, dark moments where 10 years ago, it would have been too dark for television. I recall the just getting rid of the body in a tub full of lye. You'd never see that in a show 10 years ago, because it was just too graphic, too dark. And now the audiences are really embracing that. So we're seeing everybody and their mom basically come out and be like, how can we milk this? Which is, I think, unfortunate. But at the same token, it does open up doors, and it does make it so that from an investor standpoint, investors are much more likely to be open to doing genre. Like, genre has always been on an independent level, the easiest way to recoup your budget, because you don't have to have an A-lister, right? Like you can make $100,000 movie and make $100,000 back. You can't do that in comedy. You can't do that in drama. You never have been able to,
right?
You know, because people watch a Will Ferrell film. They don't watch a comedy. They watch, you know, a Meryl Streep film. They don't watch a drama per se. That said, I think that they're finally in a position where people are trying to figure out, like, how can we just make these en masse? And my fear, and what I hope doesn't happen, but I do think it probably will, is that we're going to overdose. It's going to be too much, just because right now they're literally like the executives in the studios are trying to remake everything.
Like too much Star Wars. This is going to be too much horror, but it is sort of, I feel like it's a golden age in this sense. Like the franchises are never going away, right? The new Chucky, the new Halloween, the new Friday the 13th, whatever it is, because, and that's true not just in horror. I mean, there's so many franchises, especially in genre, that have come back. Predator. I mean, they made a Total Recall movie.
Yeah.
You know, like again, like what? And none of these are good. These trying to resurrect some of these old franchises don't tend to work. It's difficult.
Well, because like I don't think nobody's asking what can we do to make it better, or what were the limitations that we had at the time, which I wish they would, because when you look at it, even like Total Recall for me is such a great film in and of itself. Although I'm not
the original,
the Arnold Schwarzenegger, but I do think there's probably a remake that you could do given technology where it is, right? Because that was made in, I think, 88 maybe ish, approximately. And they were in that time we were so limited in our technology, and now we have so much more that we could do, where I think that there probably is a remake that if somebody looked at it from an angle of what can we do better, what could we not do then that we wanted to, what parts of the story were not told due to limitations, I think there could be a remake there. The problem is nobody's looking at that. They're like, what names are selling? How can we make this for the least amount of money, make the most amount of profit? Because it's like a marketable title, you know, it's a marketable franchise. And I wish that they would just stop doing that, because again, I think that it would be a much more sustainable business model to just try to do these movies to the best of their abilities and bring something new, because I think they'd see that in 10 years it was still making money versus just a box office cash grab, which I think most of these are. You know, I don't think people are going to be watching the Total Recall remake in 5 years. I think they're still going to be watching the original, but the remake's going to be DOA, you know, and I think the same thing with a lot of these films. Obviously, I think the exception to that is Halloween. I think they did a great job with bringing back Jamie Lee. I was not a huge, for me, the film felt like a family drama with a couple kills. It didn't feel like a Halloween film for me.
It almost felt like PG in a way, too.
Yes, very. But I expect nothing less from Blumhouse. If Blumhouse does it, it's going to be mass consumable, right?
Right. Yeah, but I mean, there are things. Here's. I mean, Norman Gidney and I actually did a whole podcast right after seeing it. We walked out of the ArcLight and we just started recording and vomited our thoughts. But the things I liked about it, I think it was disappointing, is the fact that like. It wasn't terrible and it wasn't great. It was just right there in the middle. I mean, I think a lot of my fondness for it were the callbacks, right?
Yes.
Which you have to be a fan of the original to know. I mean, I think the best thing is when you see, you know, Jamie Lee Curtis's character is like, she's laid out and then she's not there. It's the reverse, you know, that flip. So those moments were cool. But
I do think there were moments, and obviously I'm a huge Jamie Lee Curtis fan.
Oh God, I love her.
Right. Like she's so amazing.
Her and PJ Soles, I think are that. I miss PJ Soles.
Wasn't she in this?
She's
one?
in the original.
No, she was the teacher in this one, wasn't she?
Was she?
I think she was.
Oh my God, she was. All right.
I think so. Let me double check.
I'll have to check IMDb. That's funny.
I'm pretty sure there was. Yeah, and she's also lovely, by the way. I don't know if you've met her, but she's a true gem.
Never met her, but I'm familiar with her work. I really liked her actually in Stripes. Bill Murray Stripes.
I haven't seen it.
Oh my God, you got to go see Bill Murray Stripes. Classic from the 80s. PJ Soles is in it. She's amazing. But so I feel like I actually have two big questions. I almost feel like you could take the entire rest of the podcast just to answer these two questions, because they're pretty big. I might have to have you come back.
Okay.
But the first thing is, okay, I want to make a horror film. I need your advice. So I want to make a horror film, and I want you to give me advice of like, okay, what am I going to do? Like, I want to make a low budget. There'll be effects, right? I want you to tell me, what is your advice as someone who has, I mean, your experience is vast in the sense that you've done every job, right? You've done every job in that capacity. So what would you tell me to do and walk me through? It's like, okay, boom, title, concept, sellable, good script, it could be, whatever. Is it, what do you tell me? And then how do I get so that like I make a horror film that's competent, that doesn't suck, that will at least break even?
Okay.
This is the goal. Okay. Now talk for an hour, pretty much is what, right? Am I wrong?
There's so much. The first thing I tell people always is get on as many sets as you can. Mm-hmm. It is so important. And also get on a set and view it objectively. Mm-hmm. Do whatever you can to help, but don't necessarily assume that any single person on any set, regardless of budget, I don't care if it's a $50 million film or a $50,000 film, don't view it as this is the right thing to do. Just literally help and do whatever you can to help the people get the movie shot, but objectively look at everything and say, is this working? Is it not? Because what you'll find is there's a lot of things that work and there's a lot of things that don't on every single set from every single level. But there's power in knowing what you've seen work and what hasn't, regardless of what you have working with. And also, I say it's always better to learn what doesn't work when you're not putting your own investor money on the line, when it's somebody else's. You'll start seeing, okay, wait a second. When this person spoke to the actor in this tone, they weren't helping them get into that emotional place. Or they plan to shoot that emotional, torture scene at the end of the day. And at the end of a 12-hour day, that's going to be a very, very hard thing to do because people are tired and just nobody is quite on point. And the chance of that scene going over is high. And you want to try to keep your crews working 12 hours and not 13 or 14. So you want to realistically do those scenes earlier on. But you'll start to see these patterns. So I think that that's really helpful. So I would say get on as many sets as you can. Regardless of budget, even if you're just a PA, there's stuff you can learn and it's not going to cost you any money. Even if you're not paid, I've told people you'll learn enough stuff by getting on sets that it makes pay irrelevant, in my humble opinion, if you're going to go make a movie, because you'll save all the money that you would do things wrong with.
What's funny is a friend of mine who I co-wrote a book with called The Complete DVD Book, which was how to put your movie out on DVD. I'm not sure how useful that book is now since everything's digital, but my friend Paul Salamoff actually wrote an entire book about this called Setiquette. The book is called Setiquette, and it's about etiquette of being on a film set. Because sometimes you see the people who've never been on a film set and you just know oh, you're going to cause an issue. Everyone's got to be focused with the same goal, right? Which is your director rallying people to get, move toward this one goal, whatever that is. I do love that you brought up being cognizant of people's emotional states, because I feel that's so important. And for me, you see a lot of different, just having been on a lot of sets and observed friends of mine who are directors or just been on the sets with you see where directors gravitate towards what their area of interest. And some directors are purely technical, right? Almost never talk to the actors. They're like, the actors, they got it. They don't need to talk to me. Or maybe they've done their work in advance with a lot of rehearsal. So they're just fully focused on the technical aspect. And then they're the directors that, they only work with the actors and they feel like, the DP and the camera guys, and they know what they're doing. I'm just going to let them do their job, and I'm only dealing with the actors. So I think obviously a balance is probably best, but
especially on an independent film set, I think where the crew's skill is going to be a little bit all over the map. I mean, I suspect on like a $50 million movie where you've got a DP who literally has done 200 high profile movies. You know what I mean? Like I would feel more relaxed about being like, oh, the DP's got that shot. I could focus solely on the actors. In that scenario.
Yeah. But I think striking that balance is important. But I do think that just, the people management is underestimated how important that is. Oh, completely.
And also understanding how personalities work. And that's the other thing, that when you are on a set that you're not running, nobody is trying, especially if you come on set as a PA and just keep your mouth shut, nobody's going to pretend to be anything to you. So you're going to see, is that DP as skilled as he says on his resume he is, or is he full of shit? Does he treat people respectfully, or does he treat people dismissively? Especially on a low budget set, in my opinion, you really do want to try to find those people who have we are a team attitude and work as a team, and not people that have an elitist, I'm better than the team attitude, because it doesn't really work. I think once again, when you are paying people a lot more money and you have millions of dollars to play with, I think it's a little bit different because people expect a hierarchy and they're getting paid to deal with the hierarchy.
Right.
I think on a low budget movie where you're not getting paid to deal with the hierarchy, it's really important that there isn't one, or like, again, that it's very small. So finding those people, and again, you can see that when you're a PA or like a lower level and just sort of observing, and also see how people interact, you know, like, you know, do you need this? Do you need that? Like how many makeup people? Because whenever you hire crew, in my experience, people always want as many people and as much money as they can get for their departments, which is totally good.
Right.
Like you want somebody to do their best job, but you kind of also want to be aware of like, okay, from a makeup standpoint, if we have 3 female leads, do we need 2 makeup artists, or can we stagger their coverage so that one's in the makeup chair going out, getting blocked, shooting her close-ups, the other's in the makeup chair? Like how many people do we actually need to do the film well? Not necessarily from a standpoint of, is that department head's life easier, or can we just make the same result with fewer people, right? And that's, I think, something that you learn just over time and being in the field. You know, like I do typically on my independents, I love clothing. I have a fashion design degree. I usually do my own wardrobe. It's not because I don't think that wardrobe people are not incredibly important to a film set, but I know as an actor and being on film set, my mind, just from being trained as a fashion designer for so many years, I think in terms of like, how does that look on camera? Like, do I want it to be buttoned up? Do I want it to be closed? You know, is it fit properly? Is it done? Do I have a triplicate of it? Is it properly filed? What were they wearing the next scene? So I typically do that myself for that reason, because I just know that's how my brain works. So I don't need to allocate money or have an extra body on set. And also for me on an independent set, something I try to warn people is, in my experience, you want to have the right amount of people to do the job well, but not have an excessive amount, because every extra person's one more person, not only that you have to feed and water effectively, right, which on an independent film set, just more of a hassle, but it's another person to make sure that they're not making noise, not moving during the set. It's another person to have to sort of corral. It's another person to keep track of. It's another person you have to like pay attention to who's doing what, where, when. So it's really a balancing act of having the right people in the right jobs and not having too few and not having too many, and like understanding their skill set. You know, does that DP need a focus puller, or can they do it themselves?
Right.
You know, will that infect the time? Do we have the time for that to affect? And the other thing that I discovered with directing my third film is, I think a tight schedule.
What's the third film?
Oh, the third film I directed.
This is not, I didn't get down to that. Is it not out yet?
It's not ready yet.
What's the third film?
Well, it's tentatively called An Ending, although I'm going to retitle it because I don't love the title.
An Ending?
Yeah, An Ending.
Cool. Well, let's think of what the title could be during the course of this conversation.
Okay.
But to tell us about it.
So it is my most emotional film to date. It stemmed from, well, and I'll tell you the original concept. The film is nothing like the original concept, but it's funny how it just sort of alters when you work with a writer. When my mother in 2010 got diagnosed with cancer, and she would pass away, unfortunately, pretty quickly, she lost the ability to speak, but her eyes, I could tell that she was thinking stuff, and she was kind of like in her own world. And I was like, I wonder what you're thinking. I wonder what's going on in your mind. And that sort of stemmed the thought process of this movie, where if you were trapped and unable to get out of something, but still cognizant of like conversations around you, still cognizant of the things going on, but kind of in this clouded sort of trapped state, where would you go?
That sounds torturous. It's like that. Did you ever read about that case? That guy from England, he was British. He was a British guy who he had a tragic accident, and he was conscious of everything. They thought he was in a coma, but he was aware of everything. It's like, what's that book that, I don't know if they still make kids read this book, Johnny Got His Gun?
I haven't read the book, but I am familiar with the case.
You're familiar with the story where he basically had his arms, his legs, and his face blown off, but was still alive. There was still a person in there, and the entire movie takes place in his thoughts. And it's a horrifying. I remember reading the book and just being horrified as a kid. But that British that case of that British patient who suffered through that. I mean, just he remembered and was aware of anything. It could not move, could not communicate in any form. It was bizarre. But yeah, that's to me, that's a nightmare. That's,
completely.
Yeah.
Completely.
And this is what the film plays on?
Well, it started out there and it became basically a woman's rush to the emergency room. This is like literally in the opening, only to wake up and find nobody there. And through her searching of this abandoned hospital, she finds two other women and they try to figure out how they got there, how they're going to get out. And a bunch of strange, odd occurrences happen, and they're basically in a position where they kind of have to relive the wrongs that they made in life until they make a better choice, and they can either choose to right that wrong or not. So it goes to like this deep. It's my most emotional film. It's a very emotionally driven film. It's funny because like Truth or Dare was graphic and vicious and violent, and then Mania is like overtly sexualized, and then this one's like overly emotional.
Wow. So you're in a way kind of moving away from the genre.
Well,
are you? Or
not really. No, this was like this was just like that one that I couldn't get out of my head that I had to tell, and especially like I said, where it started, and you'll see like in the movie, there's like a bunch of references to my mother's illness, very subtly. Like we'll talk after you see the movie and after it's released. Hopefully it'll do festivals starting next year. That being said, it was just very emotionally important for me to get out of my head. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
But like I have 4 films right now that are scripted, that, there's the sequel to Truth or Dare, which is much more graphic and torturous than the first one. It was always designed as a trilogy. Wait a second.
You're going to go more graphic than the first one.
Oh, by far.
And is it the similar concept? Because I just love, what is it? The Truth or Daredevils is their website? Or is
truthordaredevils.com.
Truthordaredevils.com. And they're playing Truth or Dare on YouTube.
Well,
and
so I don't know. Spoiler.
I don't want to go into too much.
Well, if you watch past the credit scene, you'll see that one of the characters survives. There's like a little snippet of an egg right there. So one of them lives. So the one that survived is in a mental hospital and unable to speak. And
so there's a connection.
So when Derek realizes that the one survived, the game's not over. So he has to break into the mental hospital to play. And that's where he finds a bunch of because how do you up the first one?
Right.
Really simple. Play it with a bunch of mental patients like in an insane asylum. And then let's play it with doctors and nurses who are worse human beings than the mental patients themselves.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, I feel terrible because I didn't watch past the credits.
Yeah, that's okay.
I just thought,
really
the credits,
snippet.
it's cool.
It's
really? Oh man.
There's like a finger twitch. It's really not.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But you see like which one.
All right. Well,
it's actually, and side note, it's designed as a trilogy. There's a super spoiler. And the third one, if it gets made, here's the thing with independent films. You never know what's going to get greenlit or invested in or not. But the third one takes place with essentially like three 15-year-olds that present themselves as like 20-somethings online. And they're the most messed up people in the entire franchise.
Oh my God.
The worst are these like kids.
I believe it because have you been on Tumblr? That is the worst, but the darkest. And I think Twitter is turning into the new Tumblr these days.
Probably.
But now that you've made the film, right? Here comes distribution.
Oh, right. Like the least fun part of everything.
Do you work out your distribution in advance when you're making this do you reverse engineer the budget and say, okay, I'm going to make this for 100 because I know distribution wise, I'm going to be able to make 150. So, do you know what I'm saying?
Well, so I don't necessarily reverse engineer. What I do say, I live by the thought process of trying to make the best movie for the least amount of money. I think that if you're an independent film, what I always recommend is you want to stick below 100K unless you have a name. And that name, let's talk about that for a second.
So this is for horror, right?
This is for a genre.
For a genre. So under 100K with no names.
Under 100 name with no names.
Okay,
and like a name is somebody who is defined that if you were to go to the middle of nowhere America, so like middle of nowhere Wisconsin, right? You ask 10 people on a street, do you know so-and-so? No other, you cannot reference they did this. No. Do you know so-and-so? And if 8 of those 10 people don't say, oh my God, yeah, I love them in this, it's not a name. Because there's a lot of filmmakers.
Okay, that's interesting.
The audience has to know them by name for them to be a name.
Because
right?
I'll have friends go, I'm working on a movie and what do you think of so-and-so from blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, no.
No, or like for me, like a lot of time it's like, who is that? And then they'll try to convince, they're a name, they did this and this. No. But if you have to reference what they did, they're not a name. I get it. You want them to be because you want them to make your movie.
I'll tell my friends that are making a bad choice in casting like that. I'll say, look, just because you can get Richard Grieco to be in your film doesn't mean that you should get Richard Grieco to be in your film. And go ahead now. You can multitask. Look up Richard Grieco. I know who he is. You probably do.
I do only from independent film, but I would argue.
Right.
And I think those people like that, if they're not like Richard Grieco, if he wanted to do the movie and I had a role that he fit, I would pay him $100 a day. Sure. But is he worth what he wants, which is more than $100 a day?
Yes,
Spoiler.
It's going to be more than 100.
Yeah. No, I would argue probably not, So I think it's paying attention to those things. So while I don't necessarily say this is what I'm going to make back, I think, again, without a name, below 100K. With a name, then you start having to ask around to like distribution companies, right? Like, what would you pay if I did this movie with this person? And most will be pretty honest with you, especially like foreign sales agents. They'll tell you straight up, this is what that's worth, But again, it better be a real name like Cuba Gooding Jr. And the other thing about that name too, and Cuba Gooding Jr. specifically, it better not be a name that's oversaturated in the independent world, right? Because the problem is a lot of these A-listers will start doing independent low budget movies because they find them lucrative, but they'll do too many. So if you're at a market and there's like 8 films with Cuba Gooding Jr., all of which are low budget
you're
horror.
competing with all the 7
right,
other.
he's no longer a good sell. Like you want to be one of the first 3 to the market. Like the first year he started doing that. You don't want to be the second year where you've got 12. You know what I mean? Because then again, he's not going to necessarily help you. He may or may not. It just depends on so many other factors. But I think it's a high risk situation. And then it comes down to just trying to make the best movie and try to get the largest reach you can, sell to as many markets as you can. Try to get the most amount of money you can get. If you can get money up front, get it. So long as it's not going to kill your back end. Please, dear God, do not take $5,000 up front and give up 75% of future royalties, right? Which is a very common deal that these smaller distribution companies are trying to make. Yeah. They'll like, and they're some of them are decent companies, but they'll be like, oh yeah, we'll give you 5,000. Like it goes from no money up front and you get 75% of the profits to 5,000 up front and they take 75% of the profit.
Have you thought about just distributing your own movies? I mean, you can do that. There are pathways to doing that.
There are, but I've never seen. So I know people that are as smart or smarter than me who have tried and failed. And I think that is such a full-time job. And I think that the other thing is you can't, even me who, we've talked extensively about social media marketing and the ability to market yourself and your films. And I'm such a proponent of doing all that and above, but I still think it's very hard to make your money back doing it independently and also to reach. I think you can reach hundreds of people. You might be able to reach thousands of people, but reaching thousands of people is not going to help you or anybody you worked with get their next project made, right? You need to reach tens or hundreds of thousands of people. And the reality of the matter is, as someone I've tried to work with aggregators by myself, and aggregators, for those of you who don't know, the place where distribution companies will utilize them to get placement for your film. So they are already working with aggregators. And there's been some thought process like, oh, as a filmmaker, I'll just go to the aggregator and skip the middleman. The problem is we don't speak aggregator. So for example, when I'm trying to do this, you get back like literally a 20-page list of everything that needs to be altered for your movie to pass quality control for every platform. And it's a lot of stupid things like 1 more second of black here. There's a distorted pixel here. Well, it's more than a full-time job for many, many months just to fix it for one platform. The thing is, as a distributor, they understand like what I did, because truth or dare, we opted to try that. After 2 months of making constant revisions and seeing, again, keep in mind when it goes through these passes, it's not a person watching it. It's all a machine. And I told the distributor when we went with them, like, hey, heads up, like I can't get it to pass from the aggregator standpoint. They're like, oh, no, don't worry. And what they do is they know all the codes. So the first time, like it comes with this list, they're just like, that's okay as per this code. That's okay as per this code. That's in note 2. But like, I don't know that. Nobody gave me that list. And again, like it's a skill set that I think would probably take you years to learn.
Right.
Because again, we don't speak aggregator. So that being said, as a filmmaker, self-distribution is typically a couple platforms, which again would be a process. So you're talking Amazon is super easy. You can do it from your phone. They keep 50% of proceeds. You do it. All you have to do is have closed captioning format. So it's really simple. But again, and I think there's a few other avenues, like you might be able to get it on, iTunes or a few of the other them. But I think as a filmmaker, it's important that it's on every platform because it's not about trying to lead your audience to the platform it's on. It's about being on the platform that the audience is naturally finding preferable, right?
Yeah, I heard that people will just randomly buy things on Xbox. I feel like what I was told is that horror sells well on Xbox, of all places. So I'm not sure if your film is on Xbox.
I don't know.
I'll bet it is. I bet your distributor put it on there. But
probably.
Like, yeah.
I mean, I hope so. I do know, like, Like for me, it's about finding, like, again, it's just about putting it in, like having it be as many places as the audience will go to. Cause like, keep in mind, you can say, oh, well, just go to, you know, Vox or wherever you want. Go there. That's where it is. Well, if the audience isn't naturally on that platform, the chance of somebody being like, I want to see this movie, so I'm going to go out of my way, download this app, pay that monthly subscription fee so I can see your movie is slim. Right?
Yeah.
So it's really important that if that audience watches Amazon Prime, it's on Prime. If that audience watches iTunes, it's on iTunes. Like wherever they're consuming content, you want to be. And I just don't think that from an independent standpoint, you can do that well as one single person. And the other thing, I think that distribution's such a full-time job.
Yeah.
It's not like I made one movie and then I'm going to dedicate my life to distributing that film. I'm not. Like I made one movie and then I was immediately at script stage on the next one, and then I make that one, and then I'm on script stage on the third, and then I make that one, you know. And that's kind of the process. So the time it would take to do it well, I personally don't have, and I don't know anybody who does. And like I said, if I can name multiple people who are more intelligent than I am and more skilled and have more experience, and they've not done it well, or they've managed to reach like 2,000 people, then that's an issue. That being said, I do think that there's an opportunity with crowdfunding to kind of figure out, like, do we do a crowdfund component so that you're making that direct sale to 2,000 people? Because that could fund a film. Well, you know,
I mean, first of all, I don't know if we're going to have time to talk about it because that was my second question.
Do we do a sequel?
Yeah. First of all, I definitely want to have you back for a separate podcast just about crowdfunding, because that is you and I, because what prompted you and I were on a panel at LA Comic-Con, and it was about social media marketing, but it ended up, you know, sort of segueing into crowdfunding based on audience questions, and that was its own panel. And I feel like I have to have you back just to talk about crowdfunding and social media marketing, because that was such a compelling topic that it deserves its own episode. We will. Will you commit to coming back?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Okay, so we're going to do another podcast.
So we'll table that part of the
discussion because it's just too big of a topic. We could do just an entire series.
Yep.
Simply on crowdfunding and social media marketing, like a spin-off series, to discuss that. I think it's fascinating.
Well, realistically, it should be to some degree of a series, simply because the algorithms are getting updated so regularly every couple months.
Right.
You know, things are shifting.
It's in constant flux. So, Jessica Cameron, thank you for being on the podcast. Where can people find you on social media so they can find out when the third film you've directed is coming out?
Right. Well, currently I am all over the place. I am on Twitter at Jessica Cameron _. I'm actress Jessica Cameron on Instagram, Jessica Cameron on Facebook, and then Inside My Indie Life and Scream Queen Stream on YouTube, which if you're not on YouTube, I'm a huge fan of that, because I think it's just a way to keep up with your audience on a more regular, less produced basis.
Who's not on YouTube?
There's some people like that, and especially like YouTube? Filmmakers, where they're like, I never go on YouTube. And I'm like, guys, it's like, for me, YouTube has become such a valuable asset of my life, just to produce consistent content, even if it's not necessarily like quote unquote on brand. It's just consistent content. If you want to know what I'm to, go to my YouTube. It's updated so regularly, unlike films where it takes a year of post-production, you know. And it's not that I wish they didn't. I wish I could turn them out faster, but they take however long they take. And I think YouTube is a really great place just to be like, here's a camera, here's a light, I'm going to talk to the camera.
Well, YouTube is also good for cat videos. I think. Oh my God, so much fun for cat videos. Cool. Thank you for being on the Film Threat podcast.
My pleasure.
You almost ready?
Live. We're alive.
Who's alive? No, we're alive. Lucky to be alive after that. It's crazy. The Truth or Daredevil's record-breaking video has hit tonight, and the gore effects are quite exquisite.
Of course. You get to choose between Truth or Dare.
1.
Whoa, wait. Are you firing on 3 or right after?
2.
Are you guys ready to play?
I can't.
Oh, what is that? What's a shotgun? Your game? It lacks structure.
Sorry.
It lacks realism. I'm bringing both those to the table. We're making the best videos yet. Are we having fun, guys?
How do you even know this?
Oh my God, something's wrong. I didn't think that would work.